This is the Spirit and Wellness Show. News and information from a higher perspective. With your host, Harry Wilkinson.
Yes, welcome to the Spirit and Wellness Show. My name is Harry Wilkinson. I am your host. And this is the show where we take a look at the days and weeks events, happenings in the world of politics, happenings in the world of science and technology and health, and just everything that influences us, everything that we interact with in the course of our week. And we take a look at it from a higher perspective, from a spiritual perspective, if you will. Now, if you've never listened to the show, try not to get scared off by the word spiritual. I know many people have various reactions to that word, including eye rolling and scoffing and what have you. My contention here, and you can take it for whatever you think it's worth, is that spirituality is a part of our nature, a part of human nature, just as much as our emotions, our five senses, our ability to see, hear, speak, communicate, that we have a sense of spirituality. And by spirituality, I'm talking about the sense of expansiveness, a sense of transcendence, a sense of there being something beyond the physical body that you are inhabiting and what you see in front of you with your two eyes. The sense of something more, the sense of connectedness. That's what I mean when I say spirituality. So, this is not a religious program. It is open to all. I don't promote any dogma, although I do talk about different religions, including atheism. But all are welcome, because at the end of the day, as far as I'm concerned, all of those different expressions of that part of ourselves, that spiritual part of ourselves, whether it's the expression of channeling it into a organizational religion or set of beliefs, or whether it is an expansiveness, kind of do what you feel kind of approach, or a complete rejection and negation of it. Those are all valid expressions. As I say, I believe it's something that we have encoded in our DNA, and in fact, the discovery of the VMAT2 gene has pretty much scientifically proven that spirituality, or that sense of expansiveness or transcendence, is encoded in our DNA. Now, for each person, it's encoded differently. So some seem to have a greater amount or influence of that gene than others. So that may very well account for the differing perspectives on these things. So when I talk about spirituality, please try to understand that that's what I mean. And that I'm not here to change anybody's mind or belief system. I'm just here to kind of give my reflection on what is going on in the world. From this perspective that I'm talking about, as I mentioned almost every time I open the show, what we talk about, what we see in the world, through the news and through what's happening in our own personal lives, these are things that we are creating on a, if you will, a metaphysical level. We actually have the ability to create our world. And so when you see stories that bring people together or pull them apart or what have you, they are ways we have of interacting, of getting involved in an illusion that we've created, an illusion that will help us to be more of who we really are and understand our connectedness better, ultimately. That's in a nutshell. So, I don't want to spend an awful lot more time opening the show. Sometimes find that people who are just tuning in aren't really understanding. But if you're tuning in, chances are you've listened before and you know what goes on here. So thank you for that, and on we go with the show today. We're going to talk about, as the title of this episode suggests, the changing climate. And we're going to talk about environment, of course, because there's some big news about that today. But I'm also talking about the changing climate in the world. For lack of a better word, the globalization, in a way, or at least the understanding of how we all affect one another. This is really starting to become manifest in so many different ways. So we're going to talk about that via the climate talks that happened in Lima, Peru, this past week, and also via some other things that are going on, including efforts to change the way we deal with our, for, again, lack of a better word, our aggressive activities abroad when we are interrogating suspects. And we're also going to talk about how it relates to the domestic situation here with, again, interrogation and policing tactics and how they affect minorities. So there's lots of focus on these areas now, as there needs to be. And I'm going to talk about what all that means. We'll talk a little bit about Hanukkah, because that's coming up in about 2 days, on December the 16th. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And we'll also throw in a vegetarian chili dish for your consumption. We'll talk about the benefits of that health-wise, and how it can also make a tasty meal at holiday time. Perhaps you have a holiday party you need to cook for, potluck of some kind. Vegetarian chili is always a good bet. So we'll talk about a good recipe for that. But first I want to talk about the new information we have, the new agreement that we have worldwide through United Nations members about how countries should be tackling climate change. So previous to this, the big news was that both China and the U.S. have finally come on board with taking steps to reduce carbon output and all of these things. And this is something that's taken a very long time for both of those countries to agree to, for various reasons. Well, I can't speak to what the United States situation is, and the fact is that our system of capitalism directly conflicts with what needs to be done to help deal with the problem of climate change. In other words, our economy, our particular type of capitalism depends on growth at all costs. And in order to protect the earth and deal with climate change effectively, that requires shrinkage in certain areas. So that's the conflict. But, and this is just, I think, really just a sign of how very severe the situation has become, and how very concrete examples of what is happening to our climate is concerned. I think those are the things that have really pushed both countries to agree to these deals. Now, basically, now with this deal out of Peru, it involves something else, because there's been a lot of wrangling over how this should be dealt with between rich countries and poor countries. Developing countries who are just now starting to, find an increasing economy and are now beginning to use more energy because of it. They are they are not happy with the wealthy countries who do the vast majority of the polluting in the world, and don't feel that they should have to pay for the impacts. The second concern is that these developing and poor countries are the countries that are generally hit the hardest and the worst and the most when events due to climate change occur, such as the rising of sea levels, dangerous storms, and so forth. So, what this agreement has been largely about was getting that sort of consciousness going, and getting the wealthier countries to agree to put a fund together to help poorer countries who are dealing with the effects of climate change. And this has happened before, but now there's a lot more momentum behind it. So basically the agreement they have is sort of a compromise, which, as I say, is offers good momentum for some sort of new global treaty, which basically that's going to be hammered out in Paris next year. But there were pledges of financing and a new classification of nations, so that nations aren't being divided into rich and poor as much as where the bulk of the emissions is coming from in different countries. So there's a lot to be done in the future for next year, but it's a very interesting start. And it's restoring a promise to the poorer countries that loss and damage would be accounted for, and something would be done to help them cope with these implications that rising temperatures have for them. And there were also target dates set in a lot of these situations, but not in every one of them. But their agreement calls for what they're saying is an ambitious agreement in 2015 that reflects the differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities of each nation. Developed countries are to provide financial support to vulnerable developing nations. National pledges to be submitted by the first quarter of 2015. by those states ready to do so. So these pledges by countries to cut certain amounts of greenhouse gases and so forth are supposed to be in, but they are not obligated to do so, and that's disturbing to a lot of environmentalists who are saying that there has to be some sort of teeth in this. But in any case, countries are to set targets that go beyond their current undertaking. And the UN climate change body is to report back on the national pledges in November. So in another year, we may have a very strong climate policy if things go well. And that's very encouraging. But the change in climate that I'm talking about and that the title of this show refers to is inclusive of that, but also really has to do with the change in climate, as I mentioned, around the world. I've talked since 2012 about the astrological alignments that many astrologers are talking about, and this has to do with two planets in particular, Uranus and Pluto. Uranus is the planet of revolution and change. Pluto is the dark planet of sometimes transformation, of death, of really ultimate power. Pluto is a very powerful sort of planet, and so the clashes that we've been going through have been these clashes of revolution. Everything from the Arab Spring that we saw, to the changeovers in leadership in the Middle East, to the restlessness and the conflicts that have come out of things like Ferguson, where the young unarmed man was shot, and Trayvon Martin in Florida, where again another young unarmed man was shot, African American man. Those issues, and issues about income inequality, which over this period of time have really become something that is a national agenda that is really forefront now, whereas before it was understood by some, poo-pooed by a lot, but not really given a lot of attention. And now that needs to be. Now, again, with this alignment, as I've spoken of for over these past years, it's very much a kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of situation. So while we make some progress in some direction, then we get something that takes us back. A good example of this is they just passed Congress here in the United States just passed a funding bill to fund the government. But in passing that, they also snuck in legislation that basically is deregulating banks again, which is setting up opportunities for another crash like the one we saw in 2008. Many people are upset about that. A lot of people don't want to see that. But as I said, it's sort of these two steps forward, 2 steps back kind of thing. We had the legislation to begin with, so now we probably have to go back and reinvigorate it and so forth and so on. Same things happening in places like where there was progress in the Middle East, and then it's taken a step back. So this is very much what this whole alignment is all about. And forgive me for going on about astrology if you don't happen to believe in astrology or see the benefits of it, but I'm just explaining from my point of view how you can see this from an astrological point of view. I find a lot of truth in it, but you may think it's all hogwash, but even if you do, I don't think that you can really deny the fact of these things that have been going on, and that the world is changing, our environment is changing, and it is changing for the good. As this is, I guess, the last show that we'll do before the Christmas holidays come, I kind of really wanted to do something that was upbeat and positive, and kind of wrap up what we've been seeing over this past period of time. Now, here's another thing that has come up in the news, is the release of this report on the CIA and how they approached interrogations after 9/11 and during the wars with Iraq and so forth and so on, and how they dealt with prisoners, suspected terrorists, and how they were tortured. Lots of flapdoodle over this one. A lot of people saying, no, you shouldn't release this because then, it will cause worldwide, blowback and everything. While others were saying, we need to admit what we've done. We need to own up to what we've done and be accountable to the American people for what we've done. So out comes this report, and it really is quite shocking, although not for many people, not really a big surprise. Most of this is things that we kind of knew were happening, but couldn't get anybody to admit to. But now we have people admitting to it, and there are things that we didn't know about. While we knew about waterboarding, we didn't know about a technique that they widely use called rectal feeding. Rectal feeding. I won't bother to explain what that is. I think you can guess. It's just too horrifying to even get into the description of. I don't think I need to. But that's what we're talking about. So, this awareness of what we've been doing, will it change anything? Well, that's the promise. That's the intent behind the release of this report, is to say that we can never let ourselves get to the point where we're doing this again. And there are steps being taken to, rein in the CIA and so forth and so on. Elsewhere in the government, there are steps being taken towards dealing with the abuses of local police departments, who similarly to the CIA, although with much less subterfuge, have used very abusive and, overly violent techniques against people they suspect to be criminals or what have you, particularly African Americans. Disproportionately African Americans, as they say. And so they are reinvigorating a national database that reports incidences where police have killed. And I say reinvigorated because it actually started in 2000, but it had so little teeth that it kind of just really vanished by 2006. Because no city police department was required to report all of their incidents. It was just, it wasn't mandated, it was a request. They didn't have to comply. Now, perhaps it seems we may have a little bit stronger legislation on that. It remains to be seen. Like I say, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But because of the awareness, when we all engage in these stories, and again, as I say, they're illusions. Even the climate change is an illusion. It's a story we're creating and telling ourselves. And through this story, we begin to understand the power that we have. truth of who we are. And we realize we're going to take care of these things. That they don't define who and what we truly are, but they are reflections of a state of illusory belief. The belief, as the Course in Miracles calls it, the belief in separation. And so, when we get into these stories, they tell us of that illusory belief, and we begin to recognize that we're not separate at all. We begin to really understand our oneness. And that's the value of these stories. If they push negative buttons, if they make you feel upset, unhappy, disturbed, you go into that energy. You feel it, and let it get as intense as you can. And then you go in and you take that energy back. You tell the truth about it. You tell the truth about who and what we are, that we are divine mind, that we are one, and that this is an illusion. And by taking the energy back, you actually do change the situation. And you may not see those changes immediately, but you're changing the environment because of what you're putting out. And that is an extraordinarily powerful tool to use. It's what I'm dedicated to doing when I do this show. So while I'm on break with the holidays, I'm going to be thinking of ways to revamp the show, make it even more helpful to those who might find it helpful, informative. Some ideas I have are expanding to an hour, having guests on to talk about certain issues, and perhaps even finding a way to monetize or bring in advertisers that will help to absorb the costs of doing a show which I basically do on my own at my own expense. But I would love to see how I can might maybe broaden this show so that it can do more and I can do more. So we'll see what happens in the new year. Alrighty. So now let me give you quickly this really nice vegetarian chili dish. And vegetarian chili is a kind of, it can be very healthful and almost medicinal, particularly if you use red chili peppers. Those chili peppers have been shown to enhance metabolism of fat, so that affects cholesterol and triglyceride levels and allows you to reduce them. So if you can use red chili peppers in your dish, that is certainly probably the best way to go. Red New Mexican chilies. So basically, you want to use cooked beans, 7.5 cups of them, 2 tablespoons of virgin, extra virgin olive oil, 2 large onions diced, 1 dried or canned chipotle pepper, and 1 tablespoon of mild red New Mexican chili powder. Or you can use more if you want more. Then you have things like a tablespoon of oregano, a tablespoon of cumin, allspice, and a large can, 28 ounces of crushed tomatoes undrained, 5 cloves of garlic mashed together, and salt and pepper to taste. Okay, so you heat the oil in a Dutch oven after you've drained the beans. You add your onions and saute them over the medium heat. Add the crushed chipotle pepper. Add the tomatoes and beans. Add the other spices, oregano, cumin, allspice, onions, and salt and pepper. And you let that simmer in the Dutch oven for 45 minutes. And then you can serve with cheese, shredded lettuce, although the cheese may negate the fat-reducing qualities of the red chili pepper, so be careful on that. But I personally need to have a little cheese on my chili. But anyway, that's it. Now you could also do this if you have a slow cooker. You can put it in a slow cooker and just let it slow cook for 6 to 8 hours. You can throw everything in the morning before you go to work or something, and let it cook throughout the day. And actually, slow cooking I think is even better way, because it gives all of the spices a chance to really mingle in and become a tasty dish. So there's your vegetarian chili recipe for the holidays. And so now it's time to close the show, I'm afraid. Sorry I did not get to the discussion of Hanukkah this year, or some of the other things I wanted to get to. But we meet next time. Stay well. Enjoy the holiday season.